Hey, welcome guys. In this video we're doing a review of the Asus PB287Q 4K monitor. Now this is a 28-inch 4K monitor with a ratio of 16:9, and with the stand it is weighing a hefty 23.3 pounds, but then again it is a 28-inch monitor. Even though this is a pretty large monitor, you actually get a lot of customization in terms of the physical way you want to position. The rotation is quite adequate and it feels great. In terms of the maneuvering of up and down, because you want to kind of keep it at eye level, you have a lot of positions available. You kind of just move it up and down and it kind of stays there in its own spring slot. You don't have to lock it in any way. There's also the ability to put it in, yes, portrait mode if you really need to do that. And of course there is also the traditional method of just moving it back and forth diagonally. I'll show you guys right now. So in terms of positioning, there shouldn't be an issue despite it taking up a lot of room on your desk space. And in addition to being able to customize where you want to place the monitor in terms of its positioning, you also have the ability to remove the back panel so you can wall mount this monitor or place it on a monitor arm. On the back right, you'll notice that there's a Kensington lock symbol because yes, it does support Kensington lock. And as for the input output, starting with the right side, we have a headphone jack and an audio in input because yes, it does have two speakers built inside, more on that later. There's a Displayport port which supports Displayport 1.2 and two HDMI 1.4 inputs. These HDMI ports also support MHL, so if you want to connect your tablet or smartphone if it supports that, you can do that. And moving over to the left, this is where you'll have the connection for your AC power. Now I do have to admit that unfortunately this isn't exactly the most attractive looking monitor, especially with the base looking plain and boring. However, with this monitor size, I am actually pleased to say that the bezels around the edges are pretty small, and I'm actually very happy about that. I expected it to be a lot larger on a monitor of this size. In addition, because it has a matte finish, it does a pretty good job at not attracting dust or fingerprints. So for those who are non-tech savvy, because this is a 4K monitor, you're basically getting 2160p picture, which is amazingly sharp and crisp. Now it does support 1.7 billion colors. However, the issue is that because it's a TN panel screen, you're not exactly getting the best color reproduction. So for those of you that do photo editing, the sharpness and detail is there, but the color reproduction isn't exactly the best. It's not terrible, but if you're a hardcore photo editor, if it's part of your job, you might want to look somewhere else. In terms of 4K video editors though, you'll find this to be a very adequate monitor for your needs. One thing to keep in mind is that the viewing angles aren't exactly the best. In the previous sample, you guys should have noticed that the clouds in the wallpaper were pretty dark, and this time they're pretty light. The monitor isn't too picky about being dead center facing the monitor, but something you don't want to be looking at from a different angle. Now I do want to stress that in terms of light reflection, this monitor does a great job. You don't get a lot of light reflection at all. In fact, it does a pretty good job of avoiding that. In regards to movie playback, you will be for a real treat. In fact, I sometimes get that wow factor when I'm looking at it. I'm just like, holy cow, I can't believe how sharp this monitor is if you're watching 4K content. Now the big question a lot of people have is, does it support 4K gaming? The answer is yes. Does it look good? Yes. Is it the best gaming experience? No. You see, this monitor, if you're using it at 4K, it caps at 60Hz refresh rate, which is fine because that's pretty standard for TVs and non-gaming monitors. However, in order to achieve that, you must have a Displayport version 1.2 wire, which is thankfully included in the box, so thanks Asus, I really appreciate that. Now in terms of HDMI, it supports version 1.4. Unfortunately, with HDMI, you will be capped at 30Hz refresh rate. So if you're hooking up your console, it won't really matter because gaming consoles cap at 1080p anyway, so you're fine in that sense. But of course, if you want to do PC gaming at 4K, the 60Hz refresh rate, you must have a Displayport port available on your computer. Now in order to game in 4K, you need a very powerful graphic card, which thankfully I have. Now it does not improve the game graphics, let's just get that straight out of the way. But it just takes what you can currently see at the graphic level and makes it a little bit sharper. Honestly though, I still prefer gaming on my 1080p gaming monitor, which has 144Hz refresh rate, which is more than double what this monitor can do. And not only that, it supports 3D gaming if I want it available. So if you want a link to the review of that gaming monitor, which I highly recommend, you can find a link in the video description. Although to stress, Asus does boast a 1 millisecond response time, gray to gray, and from my experience I have to admit the response time is pretty adequate for gaming. Built directly into the monitor settings is the ability to do a picture-in-picture mode. So the main picture you're seeing right now is my Windows 10 desktop, and the small picture is my MacBook Air, which would actually drive some hardcore Mac or Windows users nuts. And to keep those psycho hardcore Mac and Windows users insane, I've actually done the same thing but with side-by-side pictures. So this is picture by picture. Windows on left, and Mac on the right. Since, as you've already probably guessed, this monitor can take two inputs at the same time. I would like to bring a word of caution to Windows 7 users, as that's still the most popular operating system for computers right now. As you're seeing, the icons on the left are very small. This is what will happen if you try to use this on Windows 7, and scaling is pretty terrible. However, as most people are now shifting to Windows 10, there is a much better scaling option, so icons be a bit bigger. However, not all programs support this, so you might want to be careful as using this as your primary monitor. I do recommend you stick with Windows 10 if you're going to use this 4K monitor if you're a Windows user, because no one should be using Windows 8 or 8.1. As mentioned earlier, there are two 2-watt speakers built into this monitor. The monitor volume is currently at 50%, Windows is at 100%, and VLC player is about half. I'm actually playing a YouTube video which I just finished editing just not too long ago, so let's take a listen directly from the monitor. Battery is being recharged while connected to your computer. You can still actually use the 3D glasses. Now the connection to the 3D glasses. So as you can see, the built-in monitor performance isn't that great. So if you plan to hook up a gaming console, for example, you might want to hook up external speakers to the console instead. One of the most bizarre things about this monitor is the physical button placement. I don't know why, but someone at Asus thought it was a good idea to place the buttons behind the monitor and not below. So when you're going through the monitor settings, sometimes you'll have to count from left to right to get your buttons in the right placement, otherwise you might end up pressing the wrong thing. At times I tend to close the menu by accident because I end up pressing the wrong button, which is strange because other Asus monitors sometimes have the buttons right below. Still on the topic of the monitor settings, I have to say that when you can navigate the buttons correctly, the monitor settings do a great job. Asus has actually included some extra things you won't really probably need on a 4K monitor, but they did it anyway. So you have some things like preset theme settings. Now when it comes to adjusting volume, it is not easy. You'll have to go through the sound menu, then click volume, and then you can adjust it. So if you're planning to hook up a console, you want to change the volume often, it's not going to be an easy thing to achieve. It's kind of annoying. Now here's one of the things about Displayport. As mentioned, you have to have it activated on Displayport version 1.2. Because if you don't, then you'll end up stuck with 30Hz refresh rate at 4K. And as you saw, I accidentally pressed the wrong button and closed the menu because the button placement is ridiculously stupid. So you have to go to System Setup, then Displayport Stream, and then select Displayport 1.2. So it's kind of bizarre they put that in that position. Regardless though, you have other things which don't need to be included on a 4K monitor, in my personal opinion. You have stuff like a timer, and you also have the ability to put in a crosshair. So for those of you that feel like cheating, if there's a hardcore shooting game, multiplayer mode activated and there's no crosshair activated, well, the monitor has some built in for you. So at about $500 Canadian, if you can get on sale, it might be a little bit better in America because the Canadian dollar is awful. You know, 4K gaming at 60Hz refresh rate is nice. It looks great, it's stunning. However, I still prefer gaming on my 1080p gaming monitor, which has 144Hz refresh rate. And combine that with the fast response time, well, it's a solid, wicked experience for gaming. Link to that is in the video description. Overall though, this does support a great response time, and the 60Hz refresh rate is average for a TV or monitor. So it's not like it's disappointing, but you know, for its bang for buck, this is one of the best 4K monitors you can get right now. So definitely worth checking out, especially when it comes to watching videos, looking at pictures, and of course gaming, as I just mentioned. It is a pretty solid experience. You will not be disappointed, but some other issues like the speakers not being that great for this size monitor, and the buttons are kind of hard to reach the back. You know, it might put off some people, especially when it comes to making this their solo primary monitor, but definitely worth still checking out if you're interested in getting that huge pixel count. So be sure to check out the review of the gaming monitor in the video description, as well as my Facebook, Google+, Twitter links also in the video description. Hit that like button, it does help, subscribe, and thanks for watching.